All right, another video tutorial. This one is regarding dynamic trunking protocol, DTP. So with dynamic trunking protocol, basically you can configure your trunks via a hard code configuration, or you can negotiate trunking. So in this demo here, I'm going to configure both, and I'll do it on various links of these switches here. So let's take a look at switch one and see how all their interfaces configured. So switch one, gig 0/0 connecting to switch 2 gig 0/0. I can see the status of the trunking when I do a show int g 0/0 switch port. And this is basically telling me here that my gig 00 is currently configured for dynamic auto, and basically it's saying that dynamic auto is saying that I am willing to form a trunk if the other side is asking me to do trunking. So that's the dynamic, and I will automatically join the trunking request. Right now, it is configured for access, so there is no trunk yet. It's configured for access, and the operational trunk encapsulation is native right now, and negotiation is on, meaning that it's negotiating, it's ready to become a trunk, waiting on the other side. So that's 00, show interface G0/1, pretty much the same thing, because these ports are by default, this is how they look. Dynamic auto, static access as well. So what I'll do first is let's take a look at switch 2, gig 00 and 01 on switch 2. Let's focus on this right here. Switch 1 and switch 2, 00 and 01 of each switch. So show int g0/0 switch port for switch 2. And again, similar, it is dynamic auto is in access mode, and trunking is negotiating. So let us configure dynamic trunking on this. So if I go back to switch 1 and I do show interface trunk, there is no trunking going on right now. Similar for switch 2, show interface trunk, no trunking going on. So what I want to do is look at the configuration for gig 00, see where it's at, show run int g0/0. So right now it is set to no trunking yet. So what I'll do is I want to set trunking to dynamic and desirable. And so on switch 2, switch 2 says it's currently set for dynamic and auto. So if on switch 1 I set gig 00 to dynamic desirable, I'm desiring switch 2's gig 00 to become trunk. So that's what I'll do. Config T, int g0/0, switch port, trunk, encapsulation, negotiate is already in negotiate mode, so I can just do that, switch port mode, and then I'll say dynamic desirable. What are my options under dynamic? I have auto and desirable, so I'll just say desirable, boom, done. So now if I do show int trunk, I have trunking on 00, which is forming a trunk on switch 2's 00. Here's switch 2, show int trunk. And basically on switch 2, the port 00, the mode is automatic, and it is negotiating, and the default is ISL, right? ISL is the default. And so now Going back to switch 1. Switch 1 is desirable because I just configured that to be desirable. Trunking is also ISL, and it's negotiating in trunking mode. So that's desirable on this side, and it's auto on this side, and it's dynamic. So let's go ahead and write that down. So I'm just going to put desirable, and I'll change the font here, something smaller, maybe 8. And then over here, that's for gig 00. Over here, I'm going to clone this, and then I'll just change this to auto, because that's what I have here, just so I can keep track of what's going on here. So now this is a trunk between switch 1 and switch 2, gig 00, desirable, and auto on the other side. For gig 01, let's see if we can do something else here. Show int g0/1, show int g0/1 switch port, and that is showing that it is dynamic auto and it's in access mode. So we want to create a trunk there, so we're gonna have to configure trunk on 01, and on switch 2 there is no trunk on that. Show int g0/1 switch port, and that's dynamic auto, and it's currently in access mode. So going back to switch 1, I want to config t int g0/1, and let's say I want to configure this for, it's currently desirable, right? It's currently in a, actually this is in auto mode, so I want to so let's see, what do I want to do here? Switch port, trunk, encapsulation. I want to do a .1Q right now on this guy. Okay, that doesn't mean it's a trunk yet. Show int trunk, all right, because I haven't configured a mode yet. So config t int g0/1 switch port mode, and I'm going to use dynamic desirable. So now I have desirable on this side, and auto was on this side. So then I'll just do 2 desirables to see what we get. It should form a trunk as well. Now going back to switch 2, config t int g0/1 switch port mode, dynamic desirable. Okay, so both sides are desirable in this situation. So I'll just clone this so we can keep track here. That's also desirable, and I will clone this again. And this is desirable. Okay, so now I have 2 desirable, right? And basically over here on switch 1, I told it to be trunking using 802.1Q right here, encapsulation 802.1Q. So if I do a show int trunk, 802.1Q is desirable here. What about switch 2? Show int trunk. Okay, so switch 2 is also desirable, but I didn't specifically tell it to do 802.1Q. It negotiated to form an 802.1Q encapsulation method. So that's why there's an N there. It negotiated to form an 802.1Q trunking. So if I look at show run int g0/1, I just have dynamic desirable, whereas switch 1, show run int g0/1, I have .1Q. So if I was to go back here to switch 2 and I specifically put .1Q as my trunking, then it'll show that it's hard-coded for 802.1Q. Config t int g0/1 switch port trunk encapsulation .1Q. Now if I do show int trunk, now I have 802.1Q, similar to 802.1Q on switch 1 here without the negotiation. So that is the 802.1Q trunk hard-coded on link G0/1 on both sides. G0/2 on switch 1 going to switch 3. Let's take a look at that. Show int G0/2 switch port currently configured for dynamic auto, and it's in access mode. So let's go ahead and what about switch 3 gig 00? Show int G0/0 switch port. Same thing, dynamic auto, access mode. Show run int G0/0 on switch 3. Default configuration there. Show run int G0/2. Okay, so in this case, let's see what we could do here. Desirable. Let's do a hard code on instead of desirable. So basically, config t int G0/2 on switch 1. Switch port mode. My options are trunk instead of dynamic because I'm forcing a trunk now. Okay, it says it won't force a trunk if auto is set, right? So I have to get rid of the auto. So I can go config t interface G0/1. Access. Okay. /2. I have to get rid of the auto mode. Because it is negotiating. Negotiating of trunk is off. Switch port non-negotiate. Switch port mode trunk. An interface whose trunk encapsulation is auto cannot be configured to trunk. Switch port trunk encapsulation. Negotiate. Nope. Encapsulation .1Q. Switch port mode trunk. There you go. I have to set an encapsulation mode. I can't let it go to negotiate. I have to choose either .1Q or ISL for it to become a forced trunk. So now I have show run int G0/2. I have encapsulation .1Q, and I have switch mode is trunk and it's not negotiating. All right, so then what does that mean for switch 3 on port 00? Show int G0/ port type is inconsistent. Show int G0/0 switch port. Okay, so now I have to show int trunk. There's no trunk on switch 3. So on switch 3, I have to also do a force trunk. Config t int G0/0 switch port mode. Again, if I try to do this, it probably won't let me. See, because it's saying that it's configured for negotiation auto mode. It won't be allowed to set to trunk mode unless I do an encapsulation trunk of either ISL or .1Q. So switch port trunk encapsulation. I have to choose either one of these to force a hardcode trunk. So I'll do .1Q, and then I can do switch port mode trunk. There it is, show INT trunk now on switch 3. And now I have mode is on. So now I'm forcing a hard code mode of on. It's not dynamic, desirable, or dynamic auto. It's actually on. And here is my encapsulation method of 802.1Q, and trunking is on compared to show INTG, so show INT trunk on switch 1, port 0/2, and port 0/2 we also see on, right? And so let's go ahead and put that there, duplicate this, and I'm just going to change this to on, and then I'm going to duplicate this, and I'm going to say on as well. And over here, basically I have 802.1Q, 802.1Q. There it is, 802.1Q between those two links. And I think up here I have desirable 802.1Q for G0/1. Let's just clone that, put it over here so I can keep track. And then so that's G0/1 there. On switch 2, G0/1 is also 802.1Q, but that's desirable. Okay, I already got that. And on the top one, it is negotiated -ISL. There it is. So those are your various ways to configure trunking. You can either do it dynamically via desirable or auto, or you can hard code it doing a specific encapsulation of .1Q or ISL. Let's do another one here. Let's see here, so we got everything there. Let's do a hard code of ISL between switch 2 and switch 4, G0/3. So right now, G0/3 is not trunk, and I want to do, let's do this. Let's do clone this guy, clone this guy, and then I'm going to clone this guy here, right? And then for the link in between, I want to do an ISL, not negotiated. Let's see here, ISL clone. Let's see if this will work. All right, let's give it a shot here. Gig to switch 2, port 3. Dynamic, desirable, switch port mode, trunk, switch port trunk encapsulation, ISL is what I want. Okay, so that's good. And then so we got desirable and I told it to use ISL as the encapsulation method. Show run intg0/3. There it is, dynamic desirable ISL. Let's look at the trunk. Show int trunk. G0/3 now is on ISL, desirable, right? It's not negotiated because I hard coded it. I told it to be ISL. Here it is. So that's why there's no N dash in front of that. What does it look on the other side on switch 4 gig 0/1? Show int trunk 0/1 because I didn't configure anything hard coding as ISL or 802.1q. It automatically followed whatever the opposite side, which is switch 2's gig 0/3 configuration is, and switch 0/3 was configured for ISL. So gig 0/1 on switch 4 it has negotiated to be ISL as well, since it is in the auto mode. So if I was to say config T intg 0/1 switch port trunk encapsulation ISL. Now if I do a show interface trunk, now it's become a hard-coded ISL trunking. And that's how that works. And I can change this to desirable as well. Dynamic desirable. Now if I look at this, show interface trunk, I can see that it's desirable ISL, similarly to switch 2's gig 0/3, desirable ISL. So that's that. So I did a hard code. So let's do this here. Let's go back to switch 1 and switch 2. I'm going to change okay, over here I want everything to be 802.1q, and then I want it to be encapsulation switch port mode trunk. I'm just going to say hard code on, trunk on. And over here, I'm going to say trunk on. And over here, I want to say trunk on. I'm not negotiating anymore. And similarly over here, trunk on. So let's go ahead and configure that. All right, so back to switch 1. Currently, here's the configuration. So what I want to do is config T, intg 0/0, switch port, mode, trunk, switch port, trunk, encapsulation, dot 1q, switch port mode, trunk. There it is. All right, and then same thing for gig 0/1, int g 0/1, int g 0/1, switch port, trunk, encapsulation dot 1q, switch port mode, trunk. Show int trunk. All right, 00 and 01 is hard coded for mode on 802.1q, so that's good to go. On switch 2, without having to do anything, switch 2 is still set to auto like before, and then desirable like before. One of them was negotiating on 802.1q encapsulation, while the other interface was hard coded for encapsulation.1q. So I'm going to change everything to hard code on, mode on, and then 802.1q. So let's see if I can do this in the interface range. Config T, interface range G0/0 through 1. Switch port trunk encapsulation .1Q, switch port mode trunk. Done. Show INT trunk. All right, so now I have mode is hard coded to on, trunking is on, and it's both 802.1Q hard coded. So if I do show INT G0/0 switch port, I'm going to see trunking .1Q, and it is good to go. And same thing for switch 1, show INT G0/0 switch port. Okay, trunk.1Q. Negotiating of trunking is on. I wonder if I can change that. Show run INT G0/0. INT G0/0. T INT G0/0 switch port non-negotiate AND show INT G0/0 switch port. All right, I was able to turn off the non-negotiating of the trunk port because we've hard-coded, so there's no need to negotiate there. And I could do that on switch 2, gig 00. You see how it had it here. Negotiating of trunk is on, even though we hard-coded the encapsulation and the trunking mode. Let's go ahead and do config T INT range G0/0 through 1, switch port non-negotiate, show INT G0/0 switch port, and negotiation is off. Negotiation is off. How about 0/1? Should be the same. And that's that. All right, so basically that's how dynamic trunking protocol works. You can use the dynamic desirable, and then if the other side is dynamic auto, the auto is going to follow whatever the desirable side says it will be. So if dynamic desirable and ISL is on one side, the dynamic auto on the other side will be set to trunking with a negotiation of the encapsulation method, whatever the method is on its opposite side. So, and then hard coding the trunk, you can use encapsulation.1Q or encapsulation ISL, and then set your trunk switch port mode trunk, and that should be set to set the mode to on when you do your show INT trunk. So when you see trunk, when you see mode on here, that means you've hard coded the trunk. When you see desirable or auto, that's when it's dynamic. All right.